courage,
fortitudo,
wisdom,
prudentia,
temperance,
temperantia,
justice.
justitia.
Exploring ancient philosophy for the path to the good life. This is the Sunday Stoic.
This is episode 9 of the Sunday Stoic. In this episode, we're going to look at the Stoic virtue of temperance, self-control. This is sort of at the heart of Stoicism. If you want to live a content and happy life, you need to control your passions, control your fears, etc., etc. This idea of temperance kind of seeps into all the other virtues as well. These virtues tend to kind of intermingle with one another. But today we're going to focus on temperance. And this is probably one of the harder ones for me because I'm a pretty hedonistic sometimes. Like, ooh, bottle of wine. Ooh, beef jerky. Ooh, etc., etc. So, to juxtapose the Stoic virtue of temperance, I will start off with another bit of philosophy and poetry that I really admire, a verse from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Now, this is a paraphrase by Richard Le Gallion, and you can find it online as well. There are no sorrows wine cannot allay. There are no sins wine cannot wash away. There are no riddles wine knows not how to read. There are no debts wine is too poor to pay. Would you forget a woman? Drink red wine. Would you remember her? Then drink red wine. Is your heart breaking just to see her face? Gaze deep within this mirror of red wine. So there you go. There's a little bit of the hedonistic side of me. Another philosophy, which we should do a show comparing hedonism, Stoicism, and maybe Epicureanism, or some of the other philosophies of the time, although they're much smarter people than me who have covered that in much greater detail. But I prefer to do a show for non-straight-up academics, as I am not a Stoic academic myself. Anyway, so temperance, controlling yourself. And in the U.S. of A., where I live, I don't know if I've talked about this much. I live in Arkansas, which is a sort of forced temperance. I live in a dry county. Ugh. Now, I've lived in Ohio and I've lived in Canada, where temperance in the form of the notion of alcohol is bad type of temperance was nowhere near as enforced as here in Arkansas. But temperance is beyond just that meaning, the idea of controlling alcohol consumption. It's controlling your desires as well as your aversions. Can you have an influence over what you crave, over what you desire, and over what you avoid? And those are the kinds of desires we're talking about. Aligning our will with the knowledge that there are things we can control and things we can't control, and things that are ultimately good for us and things that are not so good for us in the long run. And using our power of reason and wisdom to bring our desires into line with what is good. So, we're going to hear from our 3 amigos of Stoicism today. And before we do that, I want to thank the listeners who have emailed in recently. I really appreciate the feedback. It's cool to know that someone's out there listening. And if you want to shoot me an email or want to volunteer to read for the show, or if you want to pick out some readings that you really enjoy and put together 3 different readings for a topic, by all means. I sometimes barely have time to put it all together here. So you can email me at sundaystoic@gmail.com. Also, I haven't talked about it for a bit. I have a blog that I don't use a whole lot, but it's sundaystoic.wordpress.com. I had been putting show notes on there, but I've started to just embed them in with the MP3. But I have started to post summaries of Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, also known as Moral Letters to Lucilius. I'm reading through it over a year-long period, and I've been typing up summaries of what I really took out of it. Maybe not of the whole essay, but the things I thought were important, at least to me, and then maybe a few thoughts about what I had read. So I'm going to post those at least a couple a week on that blog. So if you want to get a little more info on Seneca without reading his whole his whole giant book here, you can check out my blog and see what I thought about his readings. So sundaystoic@gmail.com. Feel free to leave a review on iTunes or wherever else. We've had a few downloads. I'm pretty proud of the fact that a guy reading Stoic philosophy into a microphone has had over well over 1,000 downloads now, so that's pretty cool. Now let's hear from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus about temperance, temperantia. A paraphrase of the thoughts of Marcus Aurelius, chapter 8, verse 12. When you reluctantly rise from sleep, remember that it is according to your constitution and human nature to perform social acts. But sleeping is something you share with irrational animals. But living according to human nature is more agreeable. The Enchiridion by Epictetus, chapter 14. If you wish your children and your wife and your friends to live forever, you are foolish, for you wish things to be in your power which are not so, and that which belongs to others to be your own. So likewise, if you wish your servant to be without fault, you are foolish, for you wish vice not to be vice, but something else. But if you wish not to be disappointed in your desires, that is within your power. Exercise, therefore, what is in your power. A man's master is he who is able to confer or remove whatever that a man seeks or shuns. Whoever then would be free, let him wish nothing, let him decline nothing which depends on others, else he must necessarily be a slave. Moral Letters to Lucilius by Seneca. Letter 71, on the Supreme Good. Verses 22 through 24. At this moment, the man who measures the souls of all men by his own is shaking his fist in my face, because I hold that there is parity between the goods involved in the case of one who passes sentence honorably and one who suffers sentence honorably. Or because I hold that there is a parity between the goods of one who celebrates a triumph and one who, unconquered in spirit, is carried before the victor's chariot. For such critics think that whatever they themselves cannot do is not done. They pass judgment on virtue in the light of their own weaknesses. Why do you marvel if it helps a man, and on occasion even pleases him, to be burned, wounded, slain, or bound in prison? To a luxurious man, a simple life is a penalty. To a lazy man, work is a punishment. The dandy pities the diligent man. To the slothful, studies are torture. Similarly, we regard those things with respect to which we are all infirm of disposition as hard and beyond endurance, forgetting what a torment it is to many men to abstain from wine, or to be routed from their beds at break of day. These actions are not necessarily difficult. It is we ourselves that are soft and flabby. We must pass judgment concerning great matters with greatness of soul. Otherwise, that which is really our fault will seem to be their fault. So it is that certain objects which are perfectly straight when sunk in water appear to the onlooker as bent or broken off. It matters not only what you see, but with what eyes you see it. Our souls are too dull of vision to perceive the truth. So our first reading is from Marcus Aurelius, and he speaks directly at me in this one, because he knows that I'm a lazy bum and I like to sleep in. This bit of vice has been tempered somewhat by becoming a father, but I do like to sleep in. It's been a vice I've had my whole life. But he says, hey, you are an animal. You are an animal. If he was alive now, he'd say, you You evolved. You're an animal just like all the other animals. You all share common ancestry. But there's something that sets you apart from the animals, and it's not sleeping in. A hippopotamus can sleep in. Your dog can sleep in. But you have this rational thought. Now, we could argue how much animals may have some of that, but animals are not launching rockets into space other than our species. So we can say we have something unique about us. We can rationalize the fact that we're not here for very long, and we know that it is in our nature to be social. So we have to live according to nature. We are social organisms, and we know that one of the other bits of Stoic virtue is justice. So get your butt out of bed, get to work for the greater good of humanity. That is what he's saying here, and I can really appreciate that. It's in your nature to get up and do something, not to pull the covers over your head and go, wake me up tomorrow. Get up, get working. I think I actually sometimes remind myself of that when it's, 5:50 and the sun's barely up or not up at all, and it's time to get moving. In the second reading, we hear from Epictetus, and in a typical Epictetus type fashion, he tells us that we need to bring our will, our desires, in line with what we can control and what we cannot control. So we have to remember how nature works. We don't control anything outside of our own mind, and sometimes we have trouble doing that. So if you want your children and wife to live forever, that's never going to happen. That's silly. Now, that stated, we know that we can grieve if something does happen, but if you sit around worrying about it all the time, you're fighting the universe, basically. Things happen, and you just have to love them as much as you can while you can, and that has to be enough, because that's all there is. So you should not focus your desires on things outside your control. So it's not very temperate, to lust after things that other people own, or to wish for things that you can't ever actually have. And he says that if you want your servant to be without fault, you are foolish. If you wish that the person, I don't have a servant, obviously, but if I did, I have Mr. Belvedere working for me, and Mr. Belvedere breaks a cup. That's human nature. You can't wish for things that aren't reality. And he says you wish a vice to be something else. You can't wish for a vice to be a virtue. Like, boy, I wish getting drunk was a virtue. Well, that's nice, but we know that while it can be fun, it leads to bad things happening. So it's best to avoid. He says, if you wish not to be disappointed in your desires, that is in your power. So this is important. This is where we change gears. These are things you can't have, but here's what you can have. You can align your desires so that you're never disappointed by what happens. So only focus your desires on what is within your power. So wine, song, love, these are things outside your power. There are things you might call indifferences, or you might have a hope for them, but not something that will determine whether or not you're happy or not. Whether or not you're happy or not. That's a terrible use of English. Oh well, anyway. So, so here's another really great thing. Another thing that comes back to temperance. A man's master is he who is able to confer or remove whatever that man seeks or shuns. Okay. What he's saying here is if you lust for things, whether it be fame, whether it be for drink, whether it be for love, whatever it is, if these are things that you want more than anything else, instead of things that you can control, you want these external things, then whoever holds power over those things is in command of you. You are then their slave. So, if there's a gentleman or a young lady that you are very attracted to, and you're insanely attracted to them, so much so that you're, out of your mind with love or lust, whatever it is, they control you at that point. If you want booze more than anything else, then the bartender or the liquor store owner has power